Hi everybody. So so now we've got the front spar is riveted to the stiffeners inside the skins. They're not actually riveted to the skins yet, that's later. We are doing some piece attachments at the bottom of the rudder. So there's attached strips and there's also rudder horn brace, or maybe just called the rudder horn, or maybe it's just called the brace. Anyway, I should get a picture of that. Here I am just doing the attach strips, which is just some good old-fashioned squeezing. And my buddy Mark came by to say hi. I will say getting that horn down there is not easy because you've already got, what happens is Vance tells you not to rivet the first 4 rivets of the skin to the lower rib. And that's because to get the rudder horn in, it has to go between the 2 attach strips up and behind where or I should say the brace, where the brace goes right behind the horn. And it's a very tight fit. I mean tight. And I got it in, had to persuade it a little bit, but it popped in, no problem. The only thing harder than getting it in is the rivets that it attaches to the main rudder with. They are in a tight, awkward spot. So here I am again, another day. And this is where I'm actually getting those rivets. I found if I just use the proper yoke that I can get back there no problem. Now there is one little note. There's a rivet on the very back of the lower part of the rudder. So old versions of the planes, and it's very difficult to get to because it's one of these things where it's right next to the skin, right where the 2 skins come together, right near the trailing edge. Where you basically have no room to work unless you want to start, moving things around. You basically have to uncleco like the first 5 or 6 holes of the trailing edge just to be able to bend the skin up to get it to, rivet anywhere. And the old versions of the plans had called for a pop rivet to go there. But now the newer versions of the plans say to go ahead and use 426 3-3 or 3-3.5. There was no way for me to get a squeezer in there. It just wasn't possible, and I didn't have a bucking bar that tiny, and I didn't want to warp the skin by unclecoing the trailing edge because the double-sided sticky tape had already cured by this point, and I didn't want to undo that. So after consulting with Vans and with my friend A&P Mark, the original pop rivet, which I believe was, I don't remember which one it is, but it's the one that was listed in there before. And you actually use the exact same pop rivets again on other places on the rudder. That it's perfectly fine to use. It's one place, and it's not as pretty as a solid rivet, but it actually fits in place. It's very solid, and that way I didn't risk, bending a skin or screwing up the bond that I had on the trailing edge already. And it's ironic because that hole isn't told to be riveted until after you put the trailing edge in place, using either a sealant, not a sealant. It used to be a sealant, now it's double-sided sticky tape. So anyway, I feel I've made the right choice. If anyone faults me for having that one pop rivet, they can suck it. So here, working on the counterweights for the top of the rudder. Counterweight's very interesting. It's a nice big piece of lead, which is a pain in the ass to drill, because lead doesn't really make shavings, it just makes, I don't know, mudded version of lead, because it just basically flows like liquid. And in the past, a lot of the other builders I've read, to keep the counterweight in place, were actually using Pro Seal to kind of hold that counterweight in place once you attach it. Vans has since, the original version of the plans have now added an attach aluminum strip, because basically you have two number 6 screws. I think there's 6, maybe they're 8. You basically have 2 screws that go through a jam nut and a lock washer, or maybe it's a, I'm sorry, jam washer and a lock nut. Anyway, but it doesn't want to stay in place very well. So the new attached piece of aluminum strip that goes across the two has nut plates on it. So anyway, to be continued.